The Biggest Loser remains one of the most iconic yet controversial reality TV shows in history. For 18 seasons, it recruited overweight Americans with the promise of life-changing transformation. What unfolded, however, was less a journey of empowerment and more a televised experiment in humiliation, cruelty, and dehumanization, hallmarks of reality television during that time period. Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we are discussing the new docu-series on Netflix, which unpacks the cultural impact of The Biggest Loser. The three-part series interviews contestants, trainers, doctors, producers, the only notable exception being trainer Jillian Michaels. This was a comprehensive series that not only unpacks The Biggest Loser itself, but also examines how reality TV has evolved, oftentimes for the worst. The nature of reality TV has drastically transformed. It is no longer demonized. In fact, many people seek out these shows in order to pursue fame. It is less about finding love or losing weight, but more about building a personal brand, gaining notoriety, and securing sponsorship deals. The first episode of the docuseries introduces us to the show, and the last two delve deeper into the tensions between trainers, doctors, and contestants, as well as controversies that eventually led to the show's end. And finally, the series ends by discussing our changing attitudes regarding health and wellness. When this show first aired, audiences were unaware of how manipulative reality shows could be, particularly in crafting storylines and portraying certain contestants as villains. According to the producer, the idea of the show came about when he saw a flyer posted by a very desperate individual who was not just seeking out a trainer, but a trainer that could save his life. And the producer comes under heavy criticism in the docuseries, and rightfully so. He attempts to defend a lot of the decisions he makes. However, a lot of his reasons feel very unconvincing, especially for someone who is very aware of how television works and what it takes to create a hit TV series. I don't have a problem giving some leeway to the trainers and to the doctors, but the core premise of the show, helping people who are at a dead end, people who are really about to lose their life if they don't lose this weight, I don't think is genuine. What made The Biggest Loser a hit is that it effectively greenlit the idea of publicly shaming and punishing people for their weight, and not only making it acceptable, but also entertaining. The show reduced each contestant's struggle to one of laziness and a lack of discipline. By framing the battle this way, it justified pushing the challenges as well as the workouts to the extreme, often at the expense of the contestants' well-being. One of the most compelling aspects of this documentary is the contrast in recollection between the trainers, the producers, and the health professionals. And I think this tension highlights a deeper societal issue, which is how obesity is often misunderstood and mistreated, and more so why obesity continues to rise in the US. Even worse, it exposed that the public's perception of what a healthy body and healthy life looks like is extremely toxic. The contrasting opinions also really does expose the show's ill intentions. The producers hired experts that were not fully equipped to deal with the types of people on the show. When the show first aired, it promised real-life transformative results, driven by good faith, and the key word here is good faith. However, there's a striking disconnect between what contestants expected going on the show and the role played by trainers and doctors on the show. Now, depending on how you watch this documentary, Bob Harper might rub you the wrong way. However, I will give him credit because at least he participated in the documentary. Both Bob and Jillian became household names because of this series, and more so, they were very likable figures. And I think the show's editing put them in a more favorable light than they deserved, and I really appreciated how the docuseries really unpacked the behind the scenes of this reality show, the editing, the challenges, how all of it was really geared to create this humiliating and socially acceptable experience. The show constantly emphasized through its editing how hard the trainers are working. Because of that, it's making the commentary that the contestants are just lazy and lack discipline. Worse, they want quick results. Watching the show, you feel bad for the trainers. However, when you zoom out, you realize that a lot of the people involved in this production really should not have been involved at all. In order for the show to be a hit, you need dramatic results. And dramatic results often happen through destructive and very unhealthy measures. Jillian and Bob have no experience working with overweight individuals. They don't even really have experience working with average people. Prior to the show, they were used to training movie stars or athletes, people looking to improve their physique. Bob, I think it's fair to say that Bob does speak for Jillian regarding their frustration and also the true purpose of these workouts. Because the producers prioritize sensationalism over the well-being of their contestants, a lot of these workouts and challenges were meant to be as crazy as possible and really were not designed to consider how that would affect each contestant or whether or not they'd even be able to recover from them. A lot of these challenges and workouts are actually designed for high-performing athletes. And looking back on the show, even someone who's relatively fit would have a hard time keeping up with Jillian and Bob, let alone people who have never gone into a gym. Besides the contestants, a lot of the solutions the show was presenting regarding weight loss was completely inaccessible to those watching the show. Maintaining a body like Jillian and Bob's is just not really possible to the average person. And this is never really made clear on the show. Instead, it presents Jillian and Bob as the gold standard. And if your body doesn't look like theirs, then you're lazy or you should be working harder. And the show really does not do a good job of unpacking what a healthy body looks like. I mean, trainers like Jillian and Bob, like to maintain that type of body is a lot of maintenance. The show simplifies this maintenance as simply just going to the gym and eating 800 calories a day. More so, many of these workouts presented on the show you can't really replicate at home, nor should you. And I think that was part of the appeal of the show. Like, if you truly wanted to change your life, you need to access The Biggest Loser. In addition, Jillian and Bob are not only presented as trainers, but they're presented almost as psychiatrists, simplifying a lot of the mental health issues these contestants had, as if all you need to do is go to the gym. The docuseries features a lot of footage of Bob and Jillian giving these contestants different instructions that make sense for people who frequent the gym. Expecting people who have very limited experience with working out to have perfect form or to walk off extreme pain is incredibly cruel. And I think this is where the producer has a lot to answer for. And it feels like the show put both the contestants and the trainers and the doctors in this pressure cooker and just waited for them to explode every season. And what's truly sinister about the show is how it manipulated both its contestants and its viewers. There is such a stark contrast between how contestants experienced their time on the show and how that footage was later edited to damage their reputation and well-being. I thought the interviews with former contestants were extremely valuable because they provide context into why these contestants decided to come on the show in the first place. More so, what compelled them to endure such pain and why they felt this pain was justified. Many of the contestants who came on the show already had extremely low self-worth. They were used to being bullied for their weight, being mocked for their weight. And so a lot of the tactics being used already fed into their own self-worth. When the show aired, viewers didn't really get a chance to know each contestant on a deep level. Instead, the show very much relies on Bob and Jillian mediating that for the audience through these very superficial pep talks that rarely addressed the contestants' deeper struggles, or really even enabled viewers to get to know them better. I found Tracy's story to be particularly eye-opening. She comes on the show literally fighting for her life, and yet she's edited to seem very selfish and conniving. And what's worse, every week she would lose weight, and rather than be applauded or encouraged, she was almost ostracized and punished because her weight loss was not earned through being yelled at or abused by trainers. Tracy's story is important because it really highlights how a lot of these extreme workouts were not necessary to achieve the dramatic results the show was looking for. And what's worse is that a lot of these workouts were actually causing long-lasting damage to their bodies. I thought Tracy's relationship to Dr. Huizinga was really insightful as well. He was brought onto the show for his reputation, not necessarily his experience. He is considered the youngest doctor in the NFL, and the reason they hired him is because he was a former athlete himself, and so he knew how to manage pain. And like Jillian and Bob, he's used to working with people who can endure a high level of pain, and he wasn't really brought on to care for the contestants. In the end, I found him to be very sincere. Like, I do think he cared about them, but that was not the original purpose of his hiring. He was there to manage their pain so they could push through long enough to endure more pain. And I really wish Jillian was interviewed because we only get to hear Bob. And from what we gather from Bob, there was a lot of tension between the doctors and the trainers. And I think this disconnect again highlights a lack of sincerity from the producers. They brought these professionals, these people who are used to working with the best of the best. I think a lot of the tension came from the fact that the trainers were told that they have full control over the diet and the workouts. And on the other hand, the doctor is being told that he's in charge of the contestants' well-being. And I think for the people on the show, this is very confusing because the doctor is telling them they need to maintain 1,000 plus calories. And then the trainers are like, no, you need to be in a calorie deficit of 800. And because the show prioritized dramatic, transformative results, the producers often sided with the person who would give them this result, which unfortunately were the trainers and not the doctor. One of the most damaging aspects of the show was its competitive structure. Contestants were not only expected to lose weight, but the team that lost the least amount of weight would be eliminated. By having contestants audition in teams of 2, it made it a lot easier to create this dramatic tension and all these rifts. And I think the documentary does an excellent job of unpacking how additional stress was placed on contestants, not in order to help them lose weight or become better, but really to increase viewership. And reality TV shows, especially at this time, people were not aware of how manufactured they really were. People did not sign up for these shows to be humiliated, and oftentimes they didn't even realize they were being humiliated until they watched the show back. I think that's what makes the show heartbreaking, is because especially in the earlier seasons, people genuinely signed up because they wanted to change their life. And you could see this in the tension between Bob and Joelle. And this was probably the highlight of the docuseries because you can tell they still hate each other. They cannot stand each other. And I thought the documentary was pretty brutal in how it edited Bob and the producers, making them rewatch a lot of these moments, having them justify their actions, and oftentimes being at a loss for words. I think the relationship between Joelle and Bob really highlighted how ill-equipped these trainers were, as well as the show, in actually providing long-lasting solutions for these contestants. And I think Joelle's story did a great job of highlighting the mental health aspect of obesity. Oftentimes, the show triggered unresolved trauma rather than help unpack or try to understand it. Jillian, Bob, the doctors on the show they were used to dealing with a certain type of clientele, and they simply didn't have the emotional bandwidth or training to deal with complex personal issues. And so their approach was ultimately just get through this and leave your problems at the door. This stark difference in mindsets really reveal a fundamental misunderstanding regarding health and wellness. You can push as hard as you want at the gym, but if the psychological and emotional issues triggering the weight gain are not addressed, then change is simply not possible. Without tackling the mental and the physical simultaneously, then these dramatic transformations the show was promising is simply not possible. And I think the show did a great job of reducing each contestant's worth to their size, stripping them of any humanity or individuality. I think this dehumanization, especially across several seasons, made it really easy to watch Jillian scream at people, kick people out of her gym for throwing up or falling down. Part of the reason the show lasted as long as it did is because of the way obesity is viewed as something shameful and self-inflicted. And this narrative really enabled viewers to judge each contestant rather than empathize with them. And I thought the last 2 episodes of the docuseries did a great job of really unpacking the effects being on the show had on them. Most of the contestants who left the show actually ended up not just gaining the weight back, but oftentimes gaining more weight. The controversy that ultimately led to the show's downfall revolved around giving pills to the contestants to speed up weight loss. And Jillian ultimately admitted to giving her contestants caffeine pills, but from what I could tell, they could never prove that the show offered the contestants anything more severe. However, the scandal was enough to raise questions about the health effects of the show's workouts, challenges, and diet, specifically whether or not they were causing damage to their contestants' bodies. Many of the contestants who returned home to their families, it was as if they returned home from war. Like many reality shows, once the winner was crowned, the producers no longer cared about what happened to them afterwards, and this reveals a genuine lack of goodwill from the producers, because if they actually cared about promoting health in America, they would have followed up with contestants. Instead, they were obsessed with licensing The Biggest Loser and making money, and a lot of this stuff associated with the brand really had nothing to do with making the average person healthier. It had to do with extorting the most money from them. And sadly, what was supposed to be an inspiring TV show ended up being this humiliating time capsule for everyone involved. Now, looking back, have things gotten better or worse? I think we can say that things have gotten significantly worse. There is still a widespread lack of understanding as to what constitutes a healthy lifestyle, and more so what a healthy body actually looks like. One of the doctors remarked that if the show was aired today, it would just follow contestants injecting themselves once a week. And I believe the idea of a quick fix solution is actually more prevalent than it ever was. If you can buy abs or a sculpt butt, honestly, why not? Especially as plastic surgery becomes more available and cheaper. I also think the image of what a healthy body looks like, or what an attractive body looks like, hasn't really changed, and in a lot of ways has actually gotten more toxic. There's still this idealized standard that is advertised to us that people feel they have to live up to. The show's premise, lose weight, change your life, is what made it a hit. It oversimplified the solution to deep medical and personal issues to just simply going to the gym. Towards the end of the documentary, Bob describes his heart attack. There have been increasing cases of bodybuilders and fit young adults suffering from cardiac arrest at the gym. Many people rely on supplements in order to build muscle, and a lot of these supplements that people are taking are not actually as healthy as they're advertised to be. And when you consider the rise of something like Ozempic, you really have to ask, why don't we demonize people who rely on chicken, protein shakes, and pills the same way we demonize people who are on Ozempic? I believe in recent years we have actually started to rethink how we approach weight loss. If products like Ozempic actually help people maintain a healthy lifestyle long term under medical supervision, then why is that so wrong? I think the issue with the show is that it offers a one-size-fits-all solution for very complex and individualized problems. And I think with the growing number of options available to people, it's hard for individuals to distinguish between what could help them and what could potentially hurt them. And I think when it comes to health and fitness, there's such a fine line between something that enhances your life and something that distracts or could even take away from your life. And I think this varies from person to person. I think this is such a wonderful documentary. I actually think this is one of the better docuseries that Netflix has produced. And if you've seen it, please let me know. And until next time.